My name is Andrew Uchenick, and this is Ross Shaffer. We are from Goucher College in Baltimore, Maryland, and we're going to be spending some time today talking about how we took some public lab computers and replaced their dual boots with some virtual Windows systems. So a little bit about us. My name's Andrew. I'm the Apple Technology Support Specialist. There's a lot of words in that title that change every couple of weeks, but I take care of all the Macs on campus. It's a small campus, so it is a one-person job. What do you do?
I'm Ross Shaffer. I'm the Lab Systems Administrator for Goucher College. I actually graduated myself in 2010 and have been full-time staff in the IT office ever since.
Cool. So a little bit about where we're from, just so you can get some background on the information. Goucher College is a private, small liberal arts school. It was founded in 1885. It's about 15, 20 minutes outside of Baltimore City. Used to be in historic Baltimore City. There's a total undergraduate enrollment of about 1,500 students. It used to be a women's school, but went co-ed in about late 80s, somewhere around there.
89, I think.
So, and we have some really nice overhead shots of, that's pretty much the whole campus.
Yeah, so you can see we have on the left side there, we have all our residential buildings. Most of our students actually do live on campus. And on the right side, we have our academic quad, all our academic buildings and administration buildings. And they're obviously all networked, and there's a lot of Macs in all of those buildings.
So, but the one that we're specifically going to talk about today is this fancy looking guy right here. This is the Athenaeum, or as it is known now, the Sanford J. Unger Athenaeum. Just had been renamed for a college president. There's our sort of showcase building that we have. There's 4 stacks of a library. There's a number of open public computer labs. There are classrooms. There's a restaurant. There's an art gallery. And it's also the building on campus, I would say, that has the most Apple devices in it altogether. So,
yep.
Cool. So I'm guessing a lot of you guys are here because you're working with labs and stuff like that. How many of you, just show of hands, are you running dual boots right now?
Cool.
Do you like dual boots? Yeah, we didn't either. So, but first, I think Ross wants to talk a little bit about why we need Windows. I worked for Apple for 6 years, so I don't think we did. But Ross wants to talk about why we need Windows.
So why do we need Windows in our college? Well, some of our professors at Goucher College, they seem to be stuck in 1885 when we were founded. And the applications that they use, they don't exist for Mac. They're Windows only. There's some devices that they use, like in computer science. They have the robotic arm, only works with Windows.
Only works with XP.
XP even, so they're not getting any updates. Some students and faculty, believe it or not, are still uncomfortable with using the dock in Windows or in Mac and the Finder. And some people just are brought up, they don't like Macs for whatever reason. I don't understand it myself, and I'm sure none of us here do, but
This student worker, we hired a student worker. He walked by my office this first day and just sort of went, "Macs are evil," and then walked away really fast. So it's kind of the culture that we're working against a little bit. So what did we have? We're going to talk a little bit about what we had and how it was set up and why we want to do some things to it. So last summer, in the Info Commons, which is basically a giant public lab, anybody can use it for anything. We had 75 Macs running Lion. And they were set up to run a dual boot to Windows 7 using Refit and Boot Camp. And there was a nice little, boot picker at the beginning. You would turn on the machine, and it didn't explain much. It basically showed you a picture of a Windows desktop and showed you a picture of an Apple logo. You could click and say, this is what you want. They also had in there 50 Dell desktops running Windows 7. Now, not the Dells, but we were using the Casper suite to manage these machines, which is fantastic. If you haven't used it, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But here's our shiny, nice Info Commons. We probably should have straightened them and fixed the cables before we took a picture. But it's a nice little room, very, very bright. What you can't see is the scary blinds that come down automatically in different times of the day. So
Casper Suite, we mentioned that we use this to manage the Macs on campus, and that really it does everything for us. It makes our lives easier as IT professionals. we can image Macs with it. We can send out different applications. We can monitor them. And our favorite thing, and our users' favorite item, is the self-service app store. And you can open that up, and it'll show you apps that we create for them that they can install per user or per group in AD. And they don't even need admin access to install these applications. And it just makes our life easier. Let's say they want Photoshop or something. They open up the app store, the self-service app store, and click go, and comes down with our license key and everything packaged, ready to go. So you can actually cover our entire campus with just one Mac Mini. We actually have 3 of them, and the other 2 are just really file storage devices to make it easier on our network, and streamline the process of sending large files out. And so the area we'll be talking about, they have their own Mac Mini just for that. And this is our server room, and you can see that we have...
It's impressive,
Yeah.
right? So.
We have storage down at the bottom, and then we have a promise array that doesn't promise anything. It just doesn't really work that well, so it's not even connected. But then we have our Mac Minis at the top, and that's our Mac infrastructure for the campus, which is pretty amazing.
I think this conference center is about the size of our college.
Yeah.
So we have a little map, just because we're going to be referencing Casper and how it works a lot, and we have a little map of the whole idea and the structure of what it does and how it works. And that little JSS guy in the center, that's our Mac Mini, and we have all the different functions of Casper. And without going in too deep, because they're here talking about their stuff too, we have the administrative side of it where you can go in, you can create packages to send out to people and create policies to say, I want you to install this application at this time. But I want to say, and self-service is there and remote is there, but I think one of my favorite things about it is the fact that there is iOS control and there's web-based control for it. So somebody can send me an email and say, oh my gosh, this person is freaking out, they don't have Photoshop. What are we going to do? When can you get over there? I can just pull my iPad out of my bag and say, install Photoshop now. And it goes. And it's really, really, really cool. You have anything you want to?
No.
Okay. So we're going to talk about what we particularly didn't like about that setup. We're going to get a little more on task with the idea here. So the drawbacks of the summer setup took up an awful lot of space on those drives. But these were iMacs that were purchased when the building was built in 2009, yeah. So there was a 160 gig image split in half with 2 partitions. And there was just a whole lot of redundancy. There were duplicate applications appearing in both OSs. Both OSs had Photoshop. Both OSs had Office. Both OSs had custom presentation software and things for computer science and things like that. Because of that, it took a really long time to start everything up. You had to reboot to switch operating systems, which I know is definitely the first world problem. But we would really like to get away from that if we can. And as much as we love Casper, I'm sure those of you who manage labs are used to people leaving them logged in. That happens, especially if you're at a college. And a lot of times they would leave them logged in Windows, or they would leave them turned off, and it was just making it a little bit difficult for us to go in and do any kind of management whatsoever.
So, yep.
Yeah, we got this one too. There was a little bit of a learning curve to use. I'm going to be honest. We are a liberal arts school. We can't expect everyone to go in and sit down at our computers and be like us and say, I'm going to sit down and poke around and figure out how to do what I want to do. There would be people who didn't understand that you could boot back and forth from Windows. There were people who would sit in front of a Mac that was booted into Windows at the time and just have no idea what was going on. So
we've got some more drawbacks for you of this.
There's a lot of drawbacks. I'm sure you guys already know about all this, but...
So network name problems. Because we've got the same name and the same MAC address per device, it would cause a lot of issues with our DNS and DHCP. To create the actual image, it took forever. We'd have to create the Mac image and then go ahead and create the Windows image, install both applications on both sides, and then pull down both images and create it. And as long as it took to create it, it took even longer to deploy it. for this lab that we'll be talking about in the conference, it took about a week and we had to shut it down. Nobody could use the machines. The image was just huge. We could only do about 4 at a time because of network bandwidth constraints.
Well, that and the way the image was built by our predecessor who had built this one specifically, we had to actually upload the free space to the image in the Windows partition.
So that was 80 gigs right there. That was for nothing. And updates also for Windows and Mac OS X. So when our users would boot to Windows, oftentimes they wouldn't be able to log in right away because updates would have to go. If that machine hadn't been turned on in Windows in a week or so, they would have to do updates. We all know how many Windows updates there are. So.
And on the Mac side, for those of you who are using Casper, a lot of the things that Casper does when you set it up, they start happening right at the beginning of the login process. So if this machine had been booted into Windows for a week and somebody sits down and says, I want to use it as a Mac, they're going to get 14 policies and installations on the gray screen at the beginning. It's going to look like the machine's frozen or not working because it's just catching up with everything that it's been doing. So the biggest problem, especially being, a 7-person IT department, was the biggest problem that we had was tickets. They never ended. There wasn't a single day, I think, that summer that at least one of us wasn't over there going and fixing something. People were calling and saying that they couldn't get the printers to work, or the printer workflow was different on the 2 different operating systems. They couldn't get their profiles and their information that they wanted to get to. They couldn't access their files on the server. They didn't know that you had to access your files on a server in a different way. There were always keychain problems. And just general questions about the workflow. How do I do this? What do I do? We would get tickets from computer science professors asking us how to connect to a file server because it was just set up very strange.
So we knew we had to plan for a solution. We couldn't take this much longer. We needed something that would switch operating systems a lot faster than previous. I mean, rebooting, it really took a while, especially with the policies that we're talking about. We needed it to be a lot smaller. It was 160 gigs going on our network to each machine. I mean, it needs to be smaller. So being smaller, it would be easy to deploy. We had to join to Active Directory on Mac and Windows on the machine after imaging it. So that would take up some more time. And we wanted something that was a lot easier to manage. As we said, we had to perform updates. It was hard to do so if it was booted in the wrong operating system, and even just configuration if it was booted into the wrong operating system.
We would even end up going over there and manually updating things because it was easier than trying to get the system that we had in place for everywhere else on campus to work.
Yeah, and we just wanted it to be easier to use for our staff, faculty, and our students, which is what we're here for. So
we had a lot of different things. We sat down with our main sysadmin and the director of computing services and bounced a whole bunch of ideas back and forth about what we could do. This was my favorite. But it's an option, right? I mean, you could, in theory, do it. It's a public lab. Students are going in and doing, and I'll be honest. We worked really hard on getting this to work for a lot of Netflix watching, a lot of recently a lot of World Cup watching. But we could continue, just suck it up and keep going with this, and spend 20 of our 40 hours every week in the info commons fixing little tiny problems as they come up. We could do local virtual machines. We could have run like VirtualBox or Parallels or something like that. Are any of you guys doing that right now? Have you tried that? Do you like it? Personally, I don't. Cool. I know I can tell. It works, yeah. So I've never really been the biggest fan of those. They're really convenient, but performance really suffers a lot. And then we had this existing VDI set up for some specific stuff on campus. And we thought, hey, why don't we just make Windows virtual and run it on all these machines that way instead of doing a dual boot? It's going to take a little bit longer to set up. It's going to be a little more complicated on our end of setting things up, but it's going to be a lot more seamless. So this is what we had.
This is what we had. We already had this. for different labs on campus. We were just testing it out. And so we had just the hardware, 4 Cisco UCS B300 M3 blades, and they were in our UCS chassis as hosts. They're all running Microsoft Hyper-V 2.0 with SCVMM. And we had 4 of them because we were running Microsoft failover cluster because they're a Microsoft product, it goes down. So if one does go down, it would migrate all our hosts, all the virtual machines to another host. And our users wouldn't know the difference. It's seamless. So each host actually had a whopping 200 gigs of RAM. And also each host had 16-core Xeon processors. These were all connected with 10 gig Ethernet to keep it speedy for our users. We also had 8 Citrix Zen desktop controllers, and these are our brokers. We'll explain more about this in a little bit. They're all running Windows Server 2008 R2 with Zen Desktop 5.5 Enterprise, and there is a newer version, but this is what we started with, so we'll look to update as time goes on. These brokers, they don't need as much RAM, so they've only got 4 gigs per controller. And the reason we have 8 of these is because each broker is assigned to a location. We found it eliminated a lot of the issues that we saw. So in our library, that's one broker. In a science lab, that's another broker. Because each broker was set up for one printer and one AD group, and it just, the users wouldn't be able to tell the difference, really. It was seamless for them for really just using the machine. They didn't know the difference. They didn't know it wasn't an actual full Windows machine.
Yeah, at one point our sysadmin went in and figured out a way to make it work with printers without doing that, but he noticed a whole lot of slowness with a lot of the processes. And our whole goal, like Ross said, was we literally went in some rooms where there were, Dell 740s sitting in there, and we replaced them with VDI thin clients in that lab, and our whole goal was to make it so that the people using the lab didn't even notice. And in these pilot programs that we started on campus, that actually happened. People thought we had fancy all-in-one sort of iMacs style computers, but they were really just dumb thin client terminals.
Yep. So for storage to store all this data, we had an EMC VNX 5300. It's in a RAID 10 configuration, so you got 4 terabytes of raw storage, and 2 terabytes of that is usable for our virtual machines. You can see our actual disks right there. So a lot of disks, and they're all pooled, so we keep speed and performance in mind. And so why did we have all this? This is one of our virtual labs. To the end user, our students, they didn't really notice the difference, as we said. They just look like monitors with Windows on them. You go and you log in, you get your Windows desktop, and all the speed and performance, that's all done in the back end by our server. And what is actually behind this monitor? It's just the WISE unit. It's a dumb terminal, really. There's no hard drive. It's just, we literally plug it into our network, and it connects to our servers and loads up our virtual image. And you can plug in USB. It'll pass through USB, sound, really anything. So,
and it's completely plug and play. To set up a new lab, once it's already been configured on the server, you set everything up with Zen Desktop, which we're going to touch on a little bit, and tell it what it's supposed to get to based on, I believe it's the subnet that it works off of.
DHCP.
And you literally just plug it in and turn it on, and it knows what to do. It boots up with a login screen. So
we did go end up with using this VDI solution, obviously.
So what we ended up doing was we built a new software image using Mavericks, which personally I like a lot better than Lion, especially since that was the current one that was out right there. We did the whole standard image creation thing. We set up our user experience by modifying the default user profile with our desktop image, our settings, our dock, all the things that everybody wanted to make it work the way that they were used to. We set it up with a single partition, which I was really happy about, because that way it had every application that everybody wanted, and we didn't have to put them on there twice. And this was Ross's idea, and I think it was a really good one. We took the Citrix Zen desktop client to connect to this, and we put it on the dock. We opened it up in Properties and renamed it to Run Microsoft Windows, and changed its icon to the Windows flag. rather than having to explain to our end users, oh, you have to open up this Citrix client, you have to log in, you have to do this, you have to do that. We made it so that you literally click the Windows flag and it starts the login process.
So to create our actual VDI image that was used in this process, we used the Citrix imaging wizard, and all of our images, they run Windows 7 Professional 64-bit, and they're all licensed on a KMS server, so we still get to keep that licensing. And all our applications are pre-installed, so we've got everything that the Windows users need to use. We set these up with 40 gig drives and a 5 gig cache drive. It didn't need to be 5 gigs for the cache drive, but that's just for logging purposes, and it's not visible to the user. So here we can see that we have the option to select what type of licensing you want to run, and we used KMS, but you could use Mac, or if you select none, you would have to enter a serial number for each individual VM that you create, so that made it a lot simpler. And then we went into our Citrix provisioning server, which is set to streaming. And what that means is that there's one drive, that one 40 gig drive streams out to all of our virtual machines. So we don't have to have...
you don't have to have 30, 40 gig clones of this image that you're using. You have it once and everybody gets to access it the same way.
Yep, so that makes it a lot smaller on our hardware. And we set our images to non-persistent. So any changes that the users make in Windows, they don't save. As soon as they log out, everything is just lost. Obviously, they have our network storage that does save, but the actual virtual machine does not save. And we don't even have antivirus on our virtual machines. I mean, we didn't really see a need for it yet because they just refresh every single time. We're looking into different solutions, but right now we don't even need anything. So once the virtual machine passes all of our checks, it's then passed to the provisioning server, and then it's presented as a disk. And most of this is just automated. You just click next a couple times, and it does it for you. So after figuring it out, it became a simpler process.
It's about as easy as installing an application. It's literally a wizard that you just click through.
Yeah, and here you can see where we have our selection. If it's private, which is read or write, or if it's standard, which is read only. So if you wanted to give users, like you can assign users a virtual machine just for their username, you can do read and write. If you want them to keep their settings and their desktop, you would select read and write. But to keep space down, it's a public lab, we just did read only.
So then we were, continuing with this. We used the Zen Desktop Wizard to actually create these virtual machines, and this was actually the easiest process of all of them, because once again, just like everything else in this setup process, it's a wizard. So you say, I want to create some virtual machines. We made them set up with 2 virtual CPUs for each machine, 2 gigs of RAM. All the images were 64-bit, and you tell it how many machines you want, what image you want to use, and we literally left and went and ate a sandwich. It takes a very long time to make some of these, but once you click through what you want, like here we're selecting the amount of machines that we're taking, the number of CPUs. I was really impressed with how easy this whole process was. Then we would go through and these were all the images that were available on our domain, because you go in and you log in and
it actually adds the images, the virtual machines to Active Directory for you as part of the wizard. So this saved us because we didn't have to go in through each machine and join them to Active Directory just to get our GPOs and on the domain. It literally adds all of them for you.
Okay, so in order to get this all rolling and make it work, we added 30 additional virtual machines with Zen Desktop to our setup. We figured it would be enough for the users that were going to sit down at the Macs and actually want to use Windows. We had a feeling there wouldn't be more than 30 of them at one time. So we used Deploy Studio, which is another fantastic utility if you're not using it, and made a custom workflow and imaged all the iMacs doing it. Like we mentioned before, this used to take a full week. We used to go in the library and say, hey, we're coming in, we're re-imaging. Don't let any students in here. We actually managed to image the Infocom in closer to 4 hours after making this change.
Yeah, we still did that when users were actually in there. We would just hop on the next machine, and when they were done with their work, we would hop on their machine and image that one. And we didn't even need to close the lab down.
Yep. And our network administrator was really happy when we told him that every machine was only joined to Active Directory once. And they noticed a lot less problems happening with DHCP and stuff like that over there. And this is really just a, hey, look how impressed we are with ourselves kind of shot, because there's our 30 virtual machines standing ready to go. This is sort of the control panel where you can go through and you can set up policies for them, like startup time, whether or not something is available. There's something called maintenance mode where you can take one of the machines out of circulation and make changes or do things to it. And it's also just sort of a nice status report at a glance. You can go and check on the status of all of your virtual machines among all of your controllers.
Make sure they're all in a ready state. And yeah, so we noticed some issues during testing, as usual. We noticed that when people opened up the Citrix Zen Desktop, which we had renamed to Microsoft Windows, it would ask for their domain and their username and then their password. And most of our users, they don't even know what our domain is. So they're not used to typing that in with the backslash and everything. So I could see a couple of users getting stuck, or maybe even all of them.
But the whole idea is we needed to find a way to communicate to people, because once again, small liberal arts school, we have a computer science program. It graduated 2 students last year. So, and that wasn't a joke, that's serious. But the whole point is that we needed to communicate to people what was going on. And to be honest, during this whole process, we thought like maybe we can get the library to help us, but we had librarians going and saying, IT's removed Windows from everything. Everything's different to all the students in there. So we were like, all right, we need to figure out what we're going to do. And we had some extra time one day, and we made this awesome desktop image of the Goucher mascot on the Mavericks wave, because we were really happy to use Mavericks. And then Athletics said that we were making fun of them. I think it's cool. Like, personally, I'm already planning on making one with him climbing the Yosemite Mountain for whenever that comes out. So
it's actually now it's our admin desktop, so we know who's logged into admin by seeing our Gopher surfing.
Gopher. So we've fixed some of this stuff.
Yeah, so we used a combination of AppleScript in Automator, and it basically helped us out, and it gave a message to the user saying what's going on. It says, this is how you log in, this is what's happening. The mouse might move automatically with Automator, and it enters in your username and domain information. And you can see it right here. It's very simple. The first one, it's just our message. Second one just gets the username, and the third one copies that username, and the fourth one launches our Citrix Zen Desktop renamed to Windows. And the AppleScript in there makes sure that Citrix is the most forefront application, because if we're going to paste something in it, it has to be forefront. And then it enters in our domain /username. So this made it a whole lot simpler for our users. They would just go in and they would see this message. Please wait, and it states that the domain will be entered in. And as you can see, we used a different photo than our Goucher Gopher surfing. And so once you click OK on the previous message, it'll come up and it'll enter automatically in. It's pretty cool. Your domain /username, just ready for your password. Once you click Logon, it'll automatically just load Windows, and all that processing power, again, is on our servers. It's not on the machine itself. So you get logged in, and you can bring it up as a full screen, and the users, they won't even notice the performance difference. They won't even notice that they're running it virtually at all, actually.
It's really impressive, Having played around with things like VirtualBox and Fusion and stuff like that, there's always that little bit of lag. Sometimes there's the screen tears or things like that when you're working with it. But here, you could go in and you could maximize this window, and people would have no idea that it wasn't just running Windows natively on it. And you can actually see from here that we've got all these special applications that the computer science and things like that ask for. We've got our Dr. Java and Eclipse and all those things, and they were very happy with this solution. students, some of them will find, when they're going in there for their Netflix streaming time, they'll be doing it in Windows, and they won't even notice that they're doing it virtually. So initially, people were confused, and like I mentioned, the library was going around telling people we deleted Windows, so we had to communicate things a little bit. And sometimes you can't underestimate the power of a cardboard sign. But people found the process a little bit easier. It was instant, well, pretty close to instant as the Windows logon process can be, but as opposed to restarting the whole machine, it was quick. And it went over so well that our college decided to remove the Dell desktops in the Athenaeum altogether. So we have these nice big empty spaces inside of our...
all the Dells are now sitting in our storage room.
There's a lot of we have a whole closet full of Dells now. But there's starting at Goucher, there's some interesting new tech things going on anyway. So one of the ideas that they're trying to have is they're like, okay, we got these Macs. These Macs have everything. They're toying around with like a bring your own device kind of hangout spot with chargers and network access and things like that. There's a lot of different ideas going around. So
updates for virtual machines. It's a lot easier than going through and even setting policies or updating each machine on Windows. If we make update changes to one virtual machine image, it actually does it on all of them. So one change makes 148 changes for our users. So it's a lot easier for us managing these things. And the way to do that, it's pretty simple as well. We go in our Citrix Provisioning Server application, which they call PVS. We make a copy of the image, so we're just not doing it live. Then we switch it to read and write, so we can actually make changes. Otherwise, it's still set to read only, and every time it gets rebooted, no changes saved. So we switch it to read and write, make our changes. We'll generally update. We'll do Windows updates. We know there's always 50 of those every time, every other week we go in. We'll update standard applications like Adobe and Adobe Flash and the Adobe Creative Suite. The browsers will update. We'll make all those changes. We'll switch it back to read only, and then literally just drag and drop into the collection. So this is the list of that application in the Provisioning Services console. You can see that one of them. The top one right there is named HOF 133-1D. That's the name of the building, the room. 1D means that we went through a couple of revisions first. Generally, we'll just start with 1A, make some updates. It'll go to 1B, 1C, and then hit 1D. And once it's where we want it, we'll just drag and drop into whichever collection on the left side, and it'll be live for all of the users using virtual machines. It's literally that simple.
This one's more you, honestly.
Yeah, so virtual machine management, we do some more things to manage them. We do use local group policies to lock them down. We noticed that when we made group policies over Active Directory, over the OUs, it would actually be a little bit slower. So we just lock them down in local group policy. And we also have Desktop Authority, which is our Windows management software. And we can push out desktop settings, and one of them is we have our My Documents folder. That, when you click My Documents, it actually goes to our network drive. So it's all there. If they have their Documents folder and they put it there, any other machine they log into, that Documents folder saves. So we use Desktop Authority to push those type of settings out. And Citrix, actually, they have a program built in. They call them HDX policies. And for the HDX policies, you go into the Desktop Studio, and it's kind of their user experience type settings. So power management, we definitely use that one because a lot of people say, how do you alleviate boot storms? That's what happens when, say, we have all 148 machines try to come on at the same time. That would really just slow our hardware down, and the users would definitely see that hit. So to alleviate the boot storms, we use power management built into Citrix Desktop Studio. So here you can see, this is for our Information Commons group. At 3 in the morning, we just have them, all 30 of those turn on. And then at 4 in the morning, we have another group turn on. So that definitely helps out. And we have them shut off at night around midnight, and we keep only about 15 running from midnight to 3 a.m. So, and obviously once they reboot, they refresh anyways. We get a clean image ready for the next day.
So this has the potential to mean some stuff for our future at Goucher College. So, when we first came up with this idea, we got a lot of pushback on it. They said, there's no way that you can get that to work. There's no way it's going to work well, and there's no way people are going to warm up to it. And all three of those things happened pretty quick after we tried it and sent it out. We were really happy with how it went, and now it's sort of taken for granted. This is how the Athenaeum works. This is how the Macs in there all function. One of the things that's actually happening, we also did just recently get a new president of our university, 9 days ago?
Yep.
So he's really big into Mac stuff, and he's really interested in the fact that we managed to take this out. And one of the things that's being talked about is they're thinking about converting our campus into an Apple hardware-only campus, which is really cool. At least I think it's really cool. They're thinking of turning public labs. This is the craziest thing ever. They want to get these vending machine things for public labs where you literally swipe your college ID and it gives you a MacBook that only works for a certain amount of time, and then you have to put it back in the machine and it scans it and puts it back in the inventory. But the whole idea to do that is we could possibly set up virtual public labs. And this is something that our president really likes the idea of, is getting rid of the physical computer lab. You could make it so that we have these images in public labs set up for students or faculty, and they can log into them from anywhere, not just sitting down. We have the infrastructure in place with the stuff that we're talking about. We don't need to change anything. We don't need to buy anything new. We need to add a certificate. Students wouldn't have to purchase or install applications that they're using for their special classes. They exist in the cloud. The update process is really simple, and we were mentioning the Casper self-service thing. The Windows 7 application, we tested it out. You can install it yourself with that. You can go into self-service and say, I want to be able to run virtual Windows in this machine. You click that, and in about 35 seconds, you're ready to go.
Be right on your dock.
So this is the way things are starting to look a little bit at Goucher right now. So that's pretty much what my desk looks like every day.
But Dell still works.
It sort of works. But yeah, right now, only users connected to our network can use those VDI services. But we're working on making it so that they could be public-facing. You could get to them for anywhere. One interesting thing about Goucher is that we actually have a study abroad requirement for our undergraduate students. They are required to go study abroad in another country. So this would allow us to let them access that for a little bit. And as I said, you can do all this with the stuff software and hardware that we already have, just with a couple more changes and some permission from our network admin. So
yeah, the download of the Windows 7 application, or Citrix, for the user, that's just 10 or 15 megs. So they would pull that down and they'd be able to run Windows just as if they had it installed, as long as they have a network connection.
So if you guys are interested in trying this kind of stuff out at your institution that you're at, it's pretty easy to do. Zen Desktop, the software that we're using to set up the virtual images, it's available as a 90-day, 99 user free trial. Sound like I work for Citrix, don't I? And Citrix Zen Server is also free to download for 10 guest machines. Now this is, all the setup guides that they have are if you're using their setups and their advisors. So if you have something sort of like VMware, vSphere, Microsoft Hyper-V, the setup's a little bit different. If you are the systems admin, you probably know what to do. If you're not, probably should talk to your systems admin about how to get it up and running. So, but I believe we've
got a short demo of just how easy it is to create an image for yourself, from a golden master image to make it into a virtual machine image. This demo was created. We just got it off of YouTube. It was created on the new version, 7.5. We run 5.5, so it's a little bit different. They actually made it a whole lot easier in 7.5.
it's already really easy, and they just made it even shorter and easier. What do we click it? Nope.
Look at that.
It's not going to play.
It might be.
How did you put that in there? Come on, Ross.
It's not playing?
Nope.
Guess it doesn't want to play.
That's fun.
Oh, what?
Is it doing something?
Yep, it should be playing right now.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, so he's just going through next, selecting his actual server that he connects to. He's going through and creating his vdisk, just giving it whatever name. He used Windows 7. So we also used dynamic disk to create this. So that means it grows. If we add new applications, the actual disk it's on will grow. We don't have to set it to exactly some sort of set, 50 gigs. It grows with us. And here you can see that it optimizes. It'll disable system restore. It'll go through disable hibernate. All recommended settings that you should be running if you're doing a VDI setup. So right now, you go through the process, click next. It actually goes and net boots to that VM. So you log in. And it'll continue with the process. And there you have it. You have a VM ready to go, and you can now use it in your VDI. We use Citrix, so that's how easy it is.
So before we show you some things that we have set up and running, because Ross has a kind of neat little demo that involves an iPad running Windows. But these are the things that we were talking about that we use to make this work. So we have, the Casper suite, of course. If you're not using it, I can't stress it enough. It has made my life so infinitely easy compared to any other way that we had to set up and manage Macs. Jamf is here, the company that makes it. Deploy Studio, I'm sure you use that. Citrix and Desktop we talked about. Have our video link there if you'd like to do it. And none of this would have been possible without a ton of help from our good friend Stanley Patterson, who's the Goucher College systems administrator. He would be here with us explaining things even more, but he has a brand new baby boy that he's excited to spend some time with. So right now, Ross is going to show you a little bit of Windows on.
Okay, so here we go. This is just literally an iPad mini on, it's on Verizon, so I'm not even on a Wi-Fi network. It's on LTE right now. So I loaded up the Citrix receiver, and I am connected on our VPN. So it shouldn't be this quick, but it really is. And I can do this anywhere, in a car, anywhere I have Verizon LTE access. So you can see, I just tap on the screen and we can get to our, it's turning colors a little bit. Put that down.
Ooh.
Almost. All right, so if I hold that like that, that'll. So yeah, it really is near instant, and all the processing power is taking place back home in Maryland on our in our IT building. We have all our applications installed. If I want to get to any of these, I would just open them up. Citrix has this receiver built for a whole bunch of devices. So they have it for Windows, obviously. That's the one we renamed. They have it for iPad, iOS. They have it for Surface RTs even. Windows 8 has an app for it. Windows Phone has an app for it. I'm probably the only one in here who has a Windows Phone. But I recommend it, sorry. But yeah, I can open up Word here and I can begin to type. If I had a Bluetooth keyboard and a Bluetooth mouse, you wouldn't know the difference. But
well, it's tiny.
Yeah.
It's an 8-inch screen.
But I'm running full Windows here, and it's really impressive to think that that's happening with no storage being done, or no processing power being done on my actual device. And that's what we really wanted at Goucher, because our iMacs that we're using in the library, they're from when the building was built in 2008. So they're all Core 2 Duos. They don't really have the processing power of the i5s and the i7 iMacs that are out today. So we avoided using those processors by doing this for Windows.
Yep. So this is, to be honest, running this virtual Windows on an iPad, it's kind of a party trick, right? But the idea is to sort of put ideas in everybody's head about, like, what could you do with this? What could be accessible to people? We're still exploring what it is right now. We're to be honest, we're kind of impressed with ourselves that we got this to work. So, but the fact, and that we got the campus to fly with it and be okay with using it. But it has potential to be lots more really cool stuff that we could do, ways that we could make our students' lives easier, ways that we can make our staff's lives easier. Creative things, we can make things easier for people. Why not try it and see how it goes? So that is pretty much the conclusion of what we have prepared, and our friend is going to come around with questions for us. There's a lot of questions.
Thanks a lot for this. If I'm understanding this correctly, what's going on is whenever someone connects to this, is it spinning up or grabbing an already booted virtual machine just for that particular user?
Yes, it's just for the user itself. Nothing doesn't really spin up, but it'll copy it from that streaming server. So there's just one disk.
Okay.
And, yeah, it's per user.
So what were the motivations to go with one virtual machine per user versus, say, a terminal services environment? What were the considerations back and forth for that?
I mean, this was just easier for us and our users. This was mainly for the public labs, so they were to log in and they could save anything, and it would go to their network drive anyways. And it just made sense for us to go kind of each machine for each VM.
The microphone is where the questions are going. So.
Sorry. Have you guys, it sounded like you guys were going to be rolling this out campus-wide, and I know you said you had multiple controllers to handle printer assignation and everything. Are you looking at things like remote reconnection from different locations to be able to handle that? And are you also looking at desktop player to handle offline use of your Windows environment?
As of right now, because this is all still pretty new, we're, like I said, we're probably keeping everything the way it is for the current future. Plus, we have a giant tech initiative going through the whole campus right now, and a complete network rebuild pending in the next couple of weeks. So as far as the answer goes to that, I don't really know what we're looking at because it all changed about a week ago. But we would be more than happy to let you know when we do. So.
DeLon from the University of Colorado. I think what you guys are doing is really great. We have our university is kind of following the same model as far as kind of trying to get rid of physical labs, do images on, or doing VMs on actual users' machines. One of the questions I had is we kind of floated around with doing VMs with the dual boot environment that we have. And initially when we mentioned this, a lot of the users were complaining about Windows launching in OS X. They felt like it wasn't a true Windows environment. Did you guys have any flack from users with that? How did you handle that? And also, do you guys have any data showing if there's any Windows usage that's dropped since you guys have moved from this, from your previous dual boot model to the current model?
Well, yeah, for that last one, actually, yeah, a lot of Windows usage has dropped. I don't remember exactly what the specs were. We probably should have taken a picture of that for this presentation.
Yeah.
But
the only hard statistics we had before were in the boot picker. How many people choose Windows, how many people choose Mac? And it was about 50-50. And that may have been because it got left in Windows or left in Mac. And right when you turn the machine on, if it says, choose this or this, people don't always, what do I want to choose? They're not tech savvy, so.
And as far as getting some pushback from people, to be honest, the only pushback that we got was from faculty and staff. The students jumped right on it. They were like, this is cool. If they even picked Windows at all, which there's still I'd say maybe the people who are using it is probably like 27, 30%, hovering somewhere roughly around there now. But they jumped right on it. They didn't mind. The faculty and staff, some of them, they were kind of like, it's not going to work. There's no way it's ever going to work, and you're never going to make this work, and we're not going to be happy with it, even though it's 1 month from the time that we can even try it. And that was sort of the attitude. And we just sort of put it out there and said, hey, try it. And eventually they sort of were okay with it.
And you guys said that you did have 50-50 when you were in the dual boot
It was
model.
about, yeah.
And now you're saying that the Windows usage has dropped. Do you feel that your users are just simply not wanting to use Windows because it's not how it used to be, where they're not actually booting into Windows?
We have a lot of users that will bring in their own Macs on campus, so if they're used to that, they're going to continue on using that. Mainly different departments that use it, like computer science. We actually, they have, all the computer science students, they had all 2 of them, have a external compiler that plugs in USB, and they didn't think that they'd get it to work on Windows running virtually on a Mac. But there's actually a registry key that we had to enable, and it passes all USB through to the VM, and that works fine. So it picked up Windows usage. But I would say that because it's booted into the Mac, that extra step of going to Windows is dropped off a little bit.
I don't think at Goucher it was a particularly hard battle to fight either. We are across the street from the largest Apple store in Maryland. We have, if you look at most of the students that we have on our campus, they're walking around with Macs and iPads and iPhones. So, anything that makes things more Apple friendly, they were pretty happy to see.
You noticed, or you mentioned that you have some students that do semesters abroad, and that they'll be wanting to remote into these, virtual machines. If you were using something that's like really intensive, like say I had an Excel spreadsheet that has 100,000 lines on it, what's the performance like for something like that? Is there an application that you use that's like really process intensive, that's like just eats up a lot of process? And what's the what's the usability like?
Well, I've never tested out like an Excel sheet with that many lines, but I have played with Photoshop, doing some pretty intensive stuff, and it's pretty cool even on the iPad, just going through on Windows Photoshop and using the touchscreen, and it's handled all my requests. The GPU is all handled by the server itself, so I haven't seen performance just.
Depending on your connection, and more than anything else, depending on your connection, the requests that you make to the system are granted really fast, but sometimes it'll take a second for it to refresh on the client for you to see it, if it's something that's really heavy. But it's really just showing the image back to you. Obviously, there's a whole lot of testing and a whole lot of things that we need to try before we're really excited that it works in the library. The next step is to see what else that we can do with it. So,
Cool, thanks.
I know with VMware View, if you're not using thin clients that are using the PC over IP with the Teraducci chipset, any flash-based video like YouTube tends to run like a dog with a brick tied to its head. Have you guys seen that with your solution at all? Does YouTube drop frames and that sort of thing?
For Firefox, actually, in Windows, running virtually, that was dropping frames. So we actually just took off Firefox completely. That was our
Problem
this
solved.
doesn't work well, you can't have
Yeah,
it. That's our
we took it
attitude.
off
So.
completely. But if you're an Internet Explorer, or we have Chrome on there as well, we can run full screen 1080 with no frames dropped, and the audio plays through and matches up, syncs up. So yes, we did notice that with Firefox, but for some reason Firefox doesn't work well in this type of situation.
I think we tested it by booting virtually to one of these images, streaming an HD episode of Top Gear through a projector and watching it, and it was pretty good. I was impressed. So.
Thank you.
So my question is, how are you going to get around then the Adobe's licensing agreement now for virtual machines? So according to like them, when we investigated it, if we wanted to virtualize Creative Cloud, we would have to cover a license for every student that we have on campus.
Right.
So that'd be 17,000 licenses, which
Right.
is kind of cost prohibitive.
Yeah, we
And not just Adobe, but like other software
Right.
too. So like, if you can't virtualize it, you know, you're kind of stuck with having to have a Windows machine around.
Right. It depends on what the application is, and a lot of the licensing issues are still being pursued and redone. We spoke briefly about budget problems at Goucher. We've had some issues getting funding for new versions of software. Some of the things that we're running are old, to be honest. Some of the things that we're running are volume licenses of things, and we're still working on that side of everything. Because I think this week we find out how much money we have to buy stuff, and we're not even here to find out. So
But for something like Adobe Creative Suite, that we use the K2 key management system. So if I have Adobe open on one and he has Adobe open on one, the K2 system will tell our server that we have two open. So that's how we're able to track that sort of usage. For other volume licensing, we'll just license it for 30 machines. That's what we have in the library, 30 machines. We'll license it for that. So
obviously we need to explore more options if we go for the full public lab. So.
Granted, they're both more terminal services products, but does this have any features similar to Connect or, for that matter, Parallels VM with interleaving windows rather than an entire desktop?
Oh, you mean like a Unity mode or something like
Yeah.
that? Yeah, unfortunately not. It does just open. Oh, wait, it does?
No, this doesn't. This doesn't.
Okay.
But there is a way to do it. We can, if we use like AppV, then we can virtualize just specific windows or specific applications that they'd be able to select it from the dock. We haven't gotten there yet, so it is possible with something like AppV.
And also, is the underlying protocol to this RDP or just something else proprietary?
It's something Citrix proprietary. Yeah.
I'm not happy to be a resource for anyone. We did something similar 3 years ago, but we went the terminal services route using Zen Desktop, and we hide the actual Windows desktop from the end user. So all they see is the Windows application open up on their Mac desktop. So it kind of helps wean people off of getting Windows if they're in their Mac environment, and just the Windows application they need opens up. And it's been very successful. We can have 20 or 30 people simultaneously connected to a single server. We don't even have the pool that you guys have, all the resources, and we're able to run 2 or 3 Windows applications without any problem. And we've also made it available so we can access it around the world. What you were talking about. So.
That's really cool.
It's very similar to his environment. We went the application streaming route instead of VDI. We're looking actually at doing VDI now for some of our more intensive applications. But are you guys utilizing any of the like NVIDIA K2 cards for any of your graphics acceleration, or are you guys just using the stock GPU on the server?
We're not. We're actually looking into going something like that route, but right now we're just using stock GPU. So.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Yep.
I was just wondering, how'd you guys get around that XP with the robot arm?
That's still on
'Cause
XP.
That is still on XP. There's a lot of people in that side of campus with the robot arms that.
Yep. Yeah, that's still there.
Hi, I was just wondering, you guys said you were looking at vending machines to do like an owner laptop
Yeah.
program. Is that something you're making or you're
No.
facilitating, or is there a vendor out there making it?
Yeah, there's a vendor that makes them, and it's really cool because when you give the laptop back to this machine, it'll re-image it for you inside the vending machine.
It
So-
has Deploy Studio
Yeah.
set up, like automated inside of it. Basically, what happened is that when our new president was chosen, and then everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, this guy likes Apple stuff." Everybody who works in IT was like, "We're going to research everything Apple that exists, and we're going to make this campus the best Apple campus that has ever existed," because they wanted to, I guess, that's. But it's cool, and somebody showed me this thing. Our director showed me this thing. I forget what the vendor's called. Do you remember?
Can't remember. We can find out.
Yeah, it is massive, and it is really, really neat, and it is very expensive. Yes, it's the one that Drexel's using. Yeah, it's the same one.
I had a question about when you talked about the applications. You say you put all the applications on one partition, Windows and Mac?
Oh, no, sorry. When we were building the Mac image, we no longer had to do 2 partitions.
Okay.
So just for the imaging process, it got a lot simpler for us.
We were just talking about how happy we were that we didn't have to do it twice. So.
Right. And the other question I had with applications is, are you using any license-based applications like AutoCAD, and do they in fact work with the VDI, and what's the response time to talk back to the license server?
We don't have AutoCAD, but we do have programs like MATLAB and SPSS that talk back to our servers. And I mean, they open right up instantly. Yeah, I mean, we haven't had an issue with that.
Hi there. So I just have a quick question. You guys, this was just for the 31 computers, right, in that lab?
Yes.
You haven't provisioned this for like other users, correct?
Oh yeah, so we have 150 total right now.
Okay. 150.
During this talk, we were just talking about this one lab on the Macs. The other users, they're on the thin clients that we showed, the Weiss units.
Yep.
So yeah, we do have it out on campus.
Yeah, because we have VMware View at UVM, and it's mixed road there.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, our whole goal with this is just to see if we could take what we already had using the thin clients and improve our library situation with it, and it worked. So. Yep.
So if you had to compare the resources that you had in place prior to the Mac-based project to the resources to implement the Mac-based project, what actually was the most significant change?
I would say it's storage. We bought the whole new EMC storage device, and just to really store our images on it, that was really the only difference we made, because we had it for over 100 machines before we started this project.
What kind of cost did that have?
So total, all in all, with all the storage and all the hosts and everything, we're about 90 grand in.
Thanks.
Yep.
Nope.
How many concurrent users are on it at any one time?
We'll look at the logs, and we'll see, if there's a class going in one of the labs, we'll see it completely full. So in the labs, we have it just 1 VM per Weiss unit. So, I mean, I've seen over 100 in use at once.
I think the most I've seen it is at like 130, 140, somewhere around there. So.
Well, if there are no other questions, if we could give a round of applause to thank these gentlemen.